Why don't wizards use guns? Seriously, a bullet travels faster than any wizard can blink. And yet, the most powerful beings in fiction have never once walked into a shop and bought a 9mm. This question has haunted Harry Potter fans and fantasy fans alike for decades. They say all it would take to kill Voldemort is a good guy with a gun. So, why don't they? And honestly, it's a really good question. Because when you actually sit down and do the math, when you look at the physics, the reaction times, the raw mechanics of how combat works in the wizarding world, the answer gets uncomfortable fast. Let's start with where every Harry Potter fan's mind goes first, the wand. The wand is the ultimate tool. It can levitate objects, unlock doors, heal wounds, erase memories, conjure fire, summon objects from across a room, and yes, kill instantly. Avada Kedavra. 2 words and you're done. No bullet required. So, on the surface, it seems obvious why wizards don't bother with guns. Why would you need one when your wand is essentially a Swiss Army knife of destruction? But here's what people forget. A wand requires intent. It requires focus. An incantation, whether spoken or thought, specific wrist movements in many cases, and most critically, it requires time. Not a lot of time, sure, maybe half a second for a skilled duelist, but time nonetheless. And yes, before someone brings it up, the elite wizards, your Dumbledores, your Grindelwalds, they can perform wandless magic. They can sometimes cast through willpower alone, without speaking or moving a wand. That's maybe a dozen wizards in recorded history. For the other 99% of the magical population, the wand is non-negotiable. The gun problem doesn't go away just because Dumbledore exists. There's another layer to this that people skip over. Stress. Spellcasting accuracy drops off a cliff when a wizard panics. We see it constantly in canon. Neville Longbottom spent years fumbling basic spells because his confidence was shot. Seamus Finnegan blew things up on a regular basis, and that was in a calm classroom with zero pressure. Ron tried to curse Malfoy in second year and ended up vomiting slugs because of a busted wand and bad nerves. These are students, sure, but the pattern holds with adults too. Tonks's magic became unstable after emotional stress in Half-Blood Prince. Her Patronus changed form, and her Metamorph Magus abilities faltered. Meanwhile, a person under stress with a gun still pulls the trigger and the bullet still goes where the barrel is pointing. Adrenaline actually helps with gross motor skills like squeezing a trigger. It actively hurts fine motor skills like the precise wrist flick needed for Expelliarmus. The biology is working against the wizard in any fight where someone is actually trying to kill you. So, basically all of them. Now consider a gun. A gun requires you to point it and pull the trigger. That's it. A gun has a much simpler action chain. Aim, squeeze the trigger, fire. The mechanics are brutally simple. And this is where the math starts to get really interesting. The average human reaction time is about 250 milliseconds. A quarter of a second. The absolute fastest humans on the planet, your fighter pilots, your Formula 1 drivers, your championship esports players, they clock in around 100th to 120 milliseconds. That's the ceiling, the best a human being can possibly do. A standard bullet leaves the barrel of a gun at roughly 550 to 600 meters per second. A 7.62 NATO round, the kind used in sniper rifles, clocks over 2,600 feet per second. At close range, say across a room, the kind of distance most wizards' duels happen, a bullet reaches its target in a fraction of that time it takes for a human brain to even register that something has happened, let alone cast a spell in response. So, picture this. You're a Death Eater. You're standing across a corridor from Harry Potter. He's reaching for his wand. You have a Glock. By the time Harry's wand is raised, by the time the first syllable of any spell has left his lips, the bullet has already arrived. It's not even close. And before someone jumps into the comments screaming about Protego, let's actually talk about the shield charm, because this is where the debate gets really spicy. Protego clearly works against magical attacks. We see it throughout the series blocking spells, deflecting jinxes, and protecting against various magical threats. I used it all the time when I played Hogwarts Legacy. Some fans argue that since a shield charm can protect against a fall from 1,000 feet, or block a waterfall strong enough to overturn a cart, it should easily stop a bullet. On the surface, that sounds reasonable, but velocity tells a different story. Terminal velocity for a falling human is roughly 55 meters per second. A pistol round travels at over twice that speed. A modern assault rifle round, over 10 times that velocity. These are fundamentally different orders of magnitude in terms of the energy being delivered to that shield. There's actually a really telling moment in the books that hints at that problem. During the duel between McGonagall and Snape, one of the most powerful and competent wizards alive, something interesting happens. Snape casts a shield charm instantly to block McGonagall's spell. No problem, standard procedure. But then, McGonagall sends a bunch of knives flying at him, actual physical fast-moving objects. Does Snape cast another shield charm? No. He forces a suit of armor in front of himself as a physical barrier instead. Think about that. One of the best duelists in the entire series, when faced with small, fast-moving physical projectiles, reached for a physical shield over a magical one. That implies the shield charm has a genuine problem with fast-moving physical objects, even for the most skilled casters. And that knife scene with Snape isn't the only time physical objects cause wizards real problems. The entire franchise is full of moments where something solid and fast catches magic users off guard. First year, a 12-foot mountain troll nearly kills Hermione by swinging a club. Several fully qualified teachers were present in the building, and the solution came down to a first-year student levitating the club out of the troll's hand, a physical countermeasure to a physical threat. The Whomping Willow has been smacking wizards around for decades, and nobody has figured out a reliable magical answer to a tree that moves faster than most people can cast. In the Forbidden Forest, Aragog's colony of giant spiders overwhelmed Harry and Ron completely. Ron was reduced to screaming in a car. Physical speed and mass consistently trump magical reflexes in the Potter universe. And a bullet is just the smartest, fastest version of that same problem. Now, some of you might be thinking, okay, but wizards could just enchant themselves against bullets, wear magical armor, and you know what? You're right. In theory, they absolutely could. Another famous wizard already did. In the Dresden Files, Jim Butcher's wizard detective Harry Dresden has a leather duster magically reinforced into what basically amounts to bulletproof armor. He's crouched down and pulled it over his head during waves of automatic gunfire and walked away fine. So the enchanted armor idea works, but here's the key difference. Harry Dresden also carries a gun, a revolver specifically. Butcher looked at this problem and just decided to be honest about it. Dresden, a full-blown wizard, carries a Smith & Wesson because, in his own words, magic is pretty damn cool when things get rowdy. But there are times when there's no replacing a firearm. He favors revolvers over semi-automatics for an in-universe reason too. A wizard's aura interferes with modern technology, and a revolver is a simpler mechanism, less likely to jam. The man audited his own magic, found the gaps, and filled them with a firearm. Nobody in the Potter universe has ever run that audit. Mad-Eye Moody, an Auror so paranoid he drank from a personal flask his entire life. Never once considered a backup weapon that works when your wand hand is cursed. Constant vigilance apparently stops at the gun shop door. A major part of magical society in Harry Potter is that wizards are incredibly insular, carrying a deeply ingrained superiority complex over Muggles and Muggle technology. Ministry employees spend so much time isolated from the non-magical world that they can barely understand technology older than they are. They don't even know what guns are. The Daily Prophet described a gun as a type of metallic weapon that operates by firing projectiles using explosive force, like they were describing some exotic alien artifact. Their newspapers literally called it a kind of metal wand. Kingsley Shacklebolt, a senior Auror, once misread the word firearm as fire leg. Arthur Weasley, whose literal job was to deal with Muggle artifacts, had an overdue report on firearms sitting on his desk. These people don't use guns because they don't know what guns are, and they don't know what guns are because they've spent centuries convinced they don't need to know. Muggle-repelling charms keep the non-magical world at arm's length, which means the technology that world is developing, including firearms, stays conveniently out of sight and out of mind. Which raises an awkward question about Muggleborns. Hermione Granger grew up in suburban England with dentist parents. Harry spent 11 years in Little Whinging, watching television and going to a regular school. Dean Thomas grew up entirely in the Muggle world. These are people who would have seen guns on the news and in every action movie ever made. They know what a firearm is and roughly what it can do. And yet, none of them ever once suggested, hey, maybe we should bring something with a bit more range than a pointy stick to the Battle of Hogwarts. The reason is actually kind of fascinating. Hogwarts trains students to treat magic as the default solution to every problem. You spend 7 years in a castle where every single problem, from opening a door to fighting a basilisk, is solved with a wand. After a while, your brain stops reaching for Muggle solutions entirely. Hermione, the most logical person in the entire series, defaulted to bluebell flames against Devil's Snare, instead of, say, a lighter. Harry's first instinct in every dangerous situation is to grab his wand, even when he's standing in a room full of perfectly throwable objects. Hogwarts is an assimilation machine, and by the time you graduate, the Muggle part of your brain has been thoroughly overwritten. Resistance, as they say, is futile. Guns do appear in Harry Potter canon, though, and the results are telling. In the film version of Philosopher's Stone, Vernon Dursley comes downstairs wielding a double-barreled shotgun when Hagrid breaks down the door. Hagrid doesn't cast a spell to stop it. He physically bends the barrels upward with his bare hands, causing Vernon to accidentally discharge it into the ceiling. That's a great comedy beat, but think about what it actually tells us. A half-giant with superhuman strength used brute force against a firearm. That's not exactly reassuring for your average wizard without giant blood. Going further back in the timeline, in the 18th century, a man named Bartholomew Barebone, whose story is expanded in the Fantastic Beast films, led a band of gun-wielding attackers in a plot to kill all witches and wizards. He actually opened fire on people he believed to be Makuza employees, who turned out to be ordinary non-magical people in the wrong place at the wrong time. None of them were killed, but the fact that anti-wizard forces turned to guns centuries ago says something. Even back then, people understood that a gun was a viable threat against a spellcaster. There's also a broader reason guns don't appear in Harry Potter that goes beyond the in-universe logic, and it's honestly the most important one. J.K. Rowling is British, the books are set in Britain, and Britain has some of the strictest gun control laws in the world. The average British person has likely never held a firearm in their life. As one commentator put it perfectly, Rowling probably didn't have guns in mind nearly as much as an American would. Not this American. Harry and Hermione, being British, wouldn't reach for guns the way American characters might. If Harry Potter were set in America and written by an American, firearms would have been deployed early and often. That's just reality. But even acknowledging all of that, there's one more argument that gun proponents love to bring up. And it's a solid one. If magic is truly superior to every mundane weapon, why on earth does Godric Gryffindor own a sword? Goblin-made steel or not, there's nothing a sword can do that a spell can't do better. It doesn't seem like a particularly useful weapon compared to guns, let alone wands. The canonical explanation from Pottermore is actually hilarious. Gryffindor used the sword when interacting with Muggles because pulling a wand on a sword-wielding opponent was considered dishonorable. He carried a mundane weapon out of courtesy, which kind of proves the point that wizards acknowledge, at least implicitly, that non-magical weapons have a place in combat. Then there's the Muggles versus Wizards war scenario, which fans have debated endlessly, and the consensus is pretty grim for wizards. Tanks, artillery, fighter jets, cruise missiles, all of these pack more destructive power than what most individual wizards can produce. Muggle electronics might not function at Hogwarts specifically, but the moment wizards step outside their magical enclaves, modern military technology works just fine. Communication, logistics, coordinated strikes, these are the pillars of modern warfare, and wizards have basically none of it. Their fastest communication method is an owl. The general conclusion most people reach is that Muggles would win in a full-scale war, unless wizards maintain total surprise. Though most individual wizards who wanted to escape could probably manage it, perhaps by apparating, teleporting instantly across distances in a way that makes them nearly impossible to hit with conventional weapons. That's actually the one genuine counter-argument. A wizard who can disapparate the moment they sense danger does have a meaningful defense edge over a shooter. But that only helps you escape, it doesn't help you win. And that quote you've probably seen floating around the internet that one attributed to Rowling, saying that a Muggle with a shotgun would beat a wizard, even Voldemort? Nobody has ever found an original source for it. It's almost certainly something she never said. But the fact that it sounds so completely plausible says everything, doesn't it? Picture how much time Harry could have saved with one decent sniper rifle. Hunt down the Horcruxes first, sure, then skip the whole final duel with a single headshot from the astronomy tower. Voldemort, of all wizards, knew what Muggle weapons could do. Tom Riddle grew up in a London orphanage and kept coming back to it every summer. Straight through the Second World War, the Blitz happened around him. Air raid sirens, rubble where houses used to be, that was his childhood scenery. He watched the Muggle world tear itself apart with machines, and he walked away with one conclusion: never becoming part of that world mattered more than anything it could offer. For Voldemort, the gun question was ideological from the start. His entire identity was built on burying the Muggle half of himself. When he finally tracked down his Muggle father, he killed the man with Avada Kedavra, the most wizarding death available. Picking up a pistol would mean admitting his father's world had something worth borrowing. And Tom Riddle would sooner die, which ironically he did several times. The Death Eaters inherited the same allergy. Their whole movement runs on the idea that Muggles are livestock, and livestock tools are beneath a wizard's hand. Lucius Malfoy once reported Arthur Weasley for enchanting a Muggle car. So, the mental image of Lucius holstering a Beretta under those robes simply doesn't survive contact with reality. In that crowd, carrying a gun would be like a vegan opening a butcher shop. Possible in theory, socially fatal in practice. Snape is the strangest case. He grew up at Spinner's End with a Muggle father, so he understood the Muggle world better than any Death Eater alive. His response was to scrub it off entirely. The teenager who invented his own curses was never going to reach for something as ordinary as a trigger, and Sectum Sempra solved every problem a bullet solves, with the bonus of being his. Here's the real gossip. Voldemort's weapon of choice was pure theater, because he ruled through fear, and fear needs a signature. A flash of green from a wand tells everyone who paid a visit, while a bullet is anonymous, something any Muggle can fire. The Dark Lord spent his final year hunting the Elder Wand because to him, the wand was the crown itself. Trading it for a revolver would be a king pawning his throne to buy a folding chair. So, where does all this leave us? Why don't wizards use guns? The honest answer is layered. Magic genuinely is incredibly powerful and versatile, and centuries of that power bred a culture too isolated and too arrogant to borrow anything from Muggles, even the things that could kill them. And beyond all of that in-universe reasons, guns aren't in the story because the author made a deliberate creative choice to keep them out. Because Harry Potter is ultimately a story about the magic of childhood, about wonder, about a world hidden just behind the ordinary one. A Glock doesn't exactly fit that aesthetic. But should they use guns? From a pure tactical standpoint, absolutely. A Death Eater willing to swallow the ideology and carry a revolver in one hand and a wand in the other would be genuinely terrifying. Imagine Voldemort with the same strategic mind he already has, finally willing to use the Muggle firepower he grew up around. The war wouldn't have lasted 7 books, it would have lasted 7 chapters. The wizarding world's greatest tactical weakness may be its refusal to take Muggle inventions seriously. It's their stubborn, blinding refusal to acknowledge that Muggles might have invented something worth paying attention to. Their prejudice is both morally ugly and tactically disastrous. And that, when you think about it, might be the most realistic thing about the entire Harry Potter series. Now, if you think wizards ignoring guns is bad, wait until you see what if Muggles fought the wizarding world. And that's your next lesson here at Stickman Hogwarts. Click now before the Ministry confiscates your remote as a suspicious Muggle artifact.